well because he's not like. I mean, he's a good player that anyone would want on their team, but he hasn't been an all-star yet. So maybe Middleton is that option. Because I don't, I think it's tough to see him staying in Milwaukee. I mean, maybe I'm wrong because they have a new coach and maybe they'll have a whole new system where these guys are going to be happy. So we'll see there.
Yeah, that would be very interesting actually, because then I feel like we'd be able to not we, but Giannis Antetokounmpo would probably become a little disgruntled after losing Parker and Middleton to other teams.
Yeah, so the whole Milwaukee thing will be interesting to watch play out. Even though he's signed for at least 3 more years, right?
He is signed for, I believe, 3 more years following the conclusion of this previous season. I believe he's got 3 years left on his contract. And another quick thing I actually did want to say is Philadelphia might have an opportunity, and I really do feel that next year will be the summer. We will see the same thing that we've seen with Kawhi Leonard in terms of Anthony Davis. I think Anthony Davis, after losing DeMarcus Cousins this year and Rajon Rondo, I think the team is going to struggle to improve on any strides they made last year. And I think Anthony Davis will be demanding a trade sooner rather than later. I do feel it will be next offseason, and Philly will have the most appropriate assets to trade for him alongside Boston. But Boston will have a lot of other things to think about next year other than Anthony Davis. And I really do feel Philly would probably be able to make the best trade offer for Anthony Davis, if that does happen.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with you. I think New Orleans is going to be better than they were next year. So I'm not 100% sure that Anthony Davis is going to be out there demanding a trade, but, maybe he will. I do think, an Embiid and Davis fit would be kind of weird. I do think Boston would be the team that probably can bring out the best package. I obviously would see the Lakers going for it too, right? They have some young assets. They can make offers there. So, but you're right. The Davis thing is going to happen maybe soon, or maybe it won't because, he might just be a different player, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I might be wrong because Julius Randle might fit in with them very nicely. Mirotic might help them out.
They were a better team as the season progressed, and none of them are that old, so I do believe that they'll be a little bit better this year.
Yeah, but losing, I think, Rajon Rondo will hurt them a decent amount. Not that he's a great player, but he did really help that team grow.
All right, let's move on to one of the second trades that we probably want to discuss would be the Carmelo Anthony trade. So Carmelo Anthony, Justin Anderson, and the Thunder 2022 first round top 14 protected pick went to the Hawks. Mike Muscala went to the 76ers, and then Dennis Schroeder and Timothy Luan Cabarrot went to the Thunder.
Yeah, okay. So, essentially, Carmelo Anthony is going to be waived and signed with what seems to be the Houston Rockets, which was the intentions of it all along. The Hawks were only taking on Carmelo Anthony, essentially, so they could get a first-round pick in return and a young player here in Justin Anderson who hasn't really developed much since coming into the league. He was a little hyped. He was a 21st pick. He was a first-round pick about 4 or 5 years ago. Hasn't done much since. I believe it was actually 3 years ago, but hasn't done much since in terms of improving a solid 8th or 9th rotation player. That's about it. They get a top 14 protected pick 4 years from now, and they give up a nice young player in Mike Muscala and Dennis Schroeder, who apparently they were trying real hard to get rid of. I understand trying to get rid of him, but trying that hard to get rid of him when he did put up, at least statistically, a nice season seems pretty odd to me. And to only get a top 14 protected first-round pick for taking on Carmelo Anthony's contract is pretty strange to me, but I guess they really wanted to get rid of Schroeder that badly, who does have over $46 million and 3 years remaining on his contract. That should be noted. And we'll get into that in a second. But what do you feel about the Atlanta Hawks return in this trade?
Yeah, if I'm the Hawks, I would think you can get a little bit more. I don't necessarily know what the beef is with Schroeder here. I think he's a decent player. I would probably see the Magic maybe wanting him a little bit because they need a point guard. I know point guards are not as needed. Just because there's a lot of them, they're not as needed in the NBA right now. But like you said, they take on Carmelo Anthony's contract, right? And they get rid of probably the best player in this deal. and all you're getting back is now that pick is probably going to stay with them because the Thunder are signed with Russell Westbrook, and Paul George is a 4-year deal, but the 4th year is a player option.
4th year is a player option, yeah.
So you do think that they're going to have Russell Westbrook and Paul George for at least that 2022 season. So that the pick is probably going to stay with the Hawks, but they're not getting much in return here. So, I mean, if you're the Hawks, I mean, if this is the only deal you were able to make, I guess you take it. But I find that kind of hard to believe.
Yeah. So, real quick, Mike Muscala to the 76ers. They get rid of Justin Anderson and Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot, who was... he was another first-round pick about 2 years ago for the 76ers, selected 24th, so a late first-round pick. Same thing, I mean, he's a shooter, hasn't developed much yet, still young, still could do something, but 76ers had a loaded roster. They actually had 17 players on their roster. They needed to bring that down to 15. They accomplished that by sending Justin Anderson and Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot out in this deal. They also sent out Richaun Holmes to Phoenix for cash, which we'll touch on quickly in a second. But Mike Muscala is 26 years old, a center. He can rebound and stretch the floor a little bit. It's exactly what they needed. It's exactly what they had signed Bjelica to do, who ended up going to Sacramento on a longer contract. So, what do you feel? A nice young backup center or a starter alongside Joel Embiid?
Well, he won't. I don't believe he'll start, but he'll come off the bench. I mean, yeah, he'll play his role. He'll play his 16 to 18 minutes, and I wouldn't expect much more from him. But whatever. It's an improvement over Justin Anderson, and especially since Justin Anderson has been a wing, and Philadelphia has a plethora of those right now on the 1-year contracts. So. They did what they had to do. He's going to fill in the Bjelica role.
Yeah. Plus, with Cabarrot, they have Fultz, who they want to play shooting guard, Zaire Smith, Furkman, Korkman. So they have enough players at the wing position there to be able to get rid of those guys without having to worry much. And then we have Dennis Schroeder and Cabarrot going to the Thunder. Essentially, them getting rid of Carmelo Anthony's contract and a 2022 first-round pick. They look like they win this trade. They get a solid point guard. Now, his fit alongside Russell Westbrook might be questionable, but we'll see how that happens to turn out. He'll be a backup point guard behind him and probably play alongside him. I did want to say he has improved. Now, his three-point shot dropped last year from about 34% to 29% from 2016-17 to 17-18. However, he did improve in terms of finishing around the basket every year since he's been in the league, and his mid-range jumper has improved every year since he's been in the league. So he is getting better with that. He doesn't have to shoot threes for the team. He could shoot the mid-range jumpers or really drive to the basket. How do you feel his fit? How do you feel he fits in with the Thunder?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Westbrook hater, so of course anyone who plays with Westbrook is not going to fit well, in my opinion. But, he'll probably do well those times when he's the point guard. He's playing against second units. Westbrook's on the bench. So he'll be able to lead the offense, and I think he'll be successful there because I do think Schroeder is a little bit of an underrated player. I mean, I didn't know that his 3-point, field goal percentage dropped that much, which that's a little bit alarming right now. But I think he'll do better playing against second units. Playing alongside Westbrook again. No one's going to be successful at doing that. So, but overall, I think this is a good deal for the Thunder. I think, gives them another player, a quality NBA player who will help them with, winning a few games.
Yeah, and as we know, the real winner of this deal now is the owner. Because of the fact that getting rid of Carmelo Anthony saves them $11 million in terms of their salary cap next year, which has a $70 million application in terms of their luxury tax. Now, real quick, I won't go deeply into this, but we're going to do a quick Ask Olaf segment where I explain the luxury tax just a little bit. Now, the Thunder were severely over the salary cap. The luxury tax is at the salary cap for next year was set to be about just under 102 million, and the luxury tax is at 123 million, around there. Now, every dollar you go over that, you have to pay a percentage of it. So the Thunder with Carmelo Anthony on their roster, their salary cap was at about 160 million. Now, for every 5 million you go over the salary cap, you pay a higher percentage. So essentially, by going over 40 million, the Thunder were going to have to pay a lot of money in luxury tax, about 160 million. And we could dive into this in a future episode, probably an upcoming episode, because of the fact that the offseason's slowing down. I could really explain this a little more in depth, and we could talk about more in terms of how this works, because of the fact that it will be an issue this offseason and next for a lot of teams. But by essentially getting rid of that 11 million, now that saves them about 70 million for next year in terms of the luxury tax bill that they were going to have to pay. I do want to, however, point out that Dennis Schroeder is signed for $15.5 million each year over the next 3 years. So even though they saved that 70 million this offseason, overall, now that with Schroeder's contract on their team, they are going to have to pay more money over the next 2 seasons than they would have had they kept on to Carmelo Anthony and essentially let him walk in free agency next season. They are going to have to pay more money in luxury tax bills over the next 2 seasons beyond 2018, 2019. So even though they do save money this year, there will be other implications in 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021.
All right, so there have been a few more trades that we're going to quickly just run by. None of these have been major trades with major implications. Let's just start, since we were talking about the 76ers. 76ers traded away Rashawn Holmes to the Suns for cash, and just cash came back to the 76ers. I kind of feel like I like Rashawn Holmes. I thought he was able to offer, so I'm not necessarily. I mean, I guess they did this because they're out of roster space, but give it up, Rashawn Holmes. He played a little bit last year. He was like the 9th guy, and for them not to be able to find a roster spot for him this year kind of, shocked me, but what are your thoughts?
Well, they really like Jonah Bolden, who they signed to a 4-year deal. He was a second-round pick, I believe, last year. Apparently, he played well overseas. They like him, apparently prefer him over Rashawn Holmes. Rashawn Holmes should be a solid backup center in Phoenix, get more playing time, which I'm sure he wanted. And this will literally, if he develops into a better player, then great. They could keep on to him long term, have him there as a 6th, 7th, 8th player, maybe a starter if he really does improve, which is hard to see. He seems to be more of a player who will play 18 to 20 minutes a game and provide some solid defense, solid rebounding, and finishing around the rim. A few more trades. This was about 10 days ago, real quick. We had a chance to touch on it, but Jeremy Lin to the Hawks. Essentially, they also receive a 2025 second-round pick from the Nets, and the rights to swap picks in 2023. And they also get the Nets get a heavily protected 2020 second-round pick. I guess the Hawks wanted Jeremy Lin. Why? I don't know. He doesn't fit their timeline, but I guess they wanted a solid point guard as a transition between Schroeder and Trae Young. Hopefully he'll be able to help Trae Young a bit. Lin's a solid shooter and playmaker. He's 29 years old, though. Doesn't fit their timeline.
Yeah. I guess it just happened. They swapped some picks here or there. But, I mean, they wanted Jeremy Lin, so...
They had the cap space, they took it. And the reason why the Nets made this trade was so they could take on Darrell Arthur and Kenneth Faried from the Nuggets, in which they also receive a 2019 first-round pick from the Nuggets, which is big. It's top 12 protected, which should fit. Denver Nuggets should make the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed. And even if they don't, they will be a 9 or 10 seed, which should net them the 13th or 14th pick in the lottery, which would then convert to Brooklyn. So a very smart trade by Brooklyn to make that top 12 protected instead of top 14, just in case they do drop to the 9th or 10th seed. They also get a 2020 second-round pick, and the Nuggets get Isaiah Whitehead, who they waived. Literally, they needed to throw in something, so they did.
Yeah, I mean, I like this deal for the Nets because they get the picks. So